Alright, what is up guys? Welcome back to another Zoids review. So we have another 2-for-1 special on wind-up Zoids today, and these two also similar to the one I did with the Barrigator and the Bear Fighter has a bit of a theme to it. These are both Empire Zoids that are designed very thematically around what type of animal they represent. And the ones we have here today is the Saicurtis, which is a beetle-type Zoid, and then of course we have the Heldigunner, which is an iguana-type Zoid, and both of these are wind-up kits, and both of these are from the Hasbro release. And we'll go ahead and start with the Saicurtis here, and unfortunately there's not a whole lot to say about this guy. Now, I do think that insect-style Zoids are very underrepresented, and that it is really cool to see more of these guys. However, this kit was not really featured in the anime or the battle story prominently very much at all. It was a Xenobus Empire Zoid in the battle story, but it was mostly just shown in the background. The original model kit for this guy was identical in color scheme to this one, with the exception that the little translucent cockpit canopy right here was molded in an orange or red translucent plastic as opposed to the green, like the 1999 release was. The 1999 NJR release and the 2002 Hasbro release are exactly identical. There was allegedly going to be a version of this that was going to be released for the RoboStrux line in the US in the 90s, and it was going to be called Scarab, but it apparently was dropped. But it was shown off in a Tomy catalog, so you were able to kind of see what that version looked like, even though it was never released. As for the model kit itself for this one, this guy does have some cool things going for it. I really like these beetle types. I don't like this one nearly as much as the new Zoids Wild Koagata Zoid things that are really cool. I really like those beetles, but this one has some cool things going for it too. It does have a completely exposed pilot though, which is silly. So the little control screen will flip forward like that, and the pilot is just kind of exposed in there. If I can get the light in there, you can see. And then the tusk trunk thing does move up and down, which is pretty cool. And it has a very, rhinoceros beetle style hood there. And it does have a couple weapons on it as well, such as on the very front of the trunk here. And these can kind of, they don't really move up and down, I don't think. So I can't seem to get them to. And then back here you have a couple of cannons back here as well. And the wings do open up like it is flying, which is a pretty cool feature. So he's pretty cool. He does have a couple really cool things going for him. But again, no real appearances in the anime or the battle story or anything really noteworthy going on with him other than some background details. Then we move on, of course, to the Heldigunner, and the Heldigunner was a lot more prominent. So this thing is an iguana type and features a lot of very advanced features. So in the battle story, this was a Gylos Empire Zoid that was implemented much later on in the war, and it is one of the fabled Dark Zoids that has the ability, I guess, to absorb sunlight and incorporate it into its power. And it is based on an iguana, so it is semi-aquatic, which means it can fight alongside other aquatic support Zoids like the War Shark against the Helix Republic Hammerheads, and was very efficient at supporting other aquatic transports and things like that. It has this triple-barreled gun up here, where even though the three barrels are not really lined up in any kind of order that makes sense, they do fire all three barrels simultaneously. And this thing is able to move on rough terrain incredibly well. Looks like he's missing his pilot in there. And this thing was very formidable and quite heavily armored for its size. During the Dark Continent of Nyx campaign, when the Helix Republic landed, their escort squadron of Barrigators was wiped out almost immediately by these things, because the Barrigators were very slow and had a hard time on the terrain, whereas these much more quick and agile Zoids were able to climb the terrain and effortlessly dispatch that whole squadron. And that was the last time that the Barrigators were implemented in combat in the battle story, if you remember my video on the Barrigators. And these were just very difficult to take down. They're very low profile. They can hide in the rocky terrain very easily. They have that very powerful main cannon. And like I said, they're quite heavily armored for their size. So just a very, very efficient light Zoid. Goes very well with the Rev Raptors. Goes very well with ambush tactics and things like that. They also had quite a few prominent roles in the anime. Of course, both of these Zoids are ones I got from my friend Brad's collection as he was selling off some of the ones he didn't very much care about. So there's some little nubs and things I can clip off to make them look a little bit cleaner. And this one does have a little bit of damage where back here this cannon on the end is kind of bent a little bit. But he's really, really long and really, really large too for what would essentially be one of the like $15 wind-up kits back in the day. Same size kit as like the Command Wolf. It just has a very, very, very long tail, and it's quite large and stout as well. But in the anime, these things were featured quite prominently throughout Chaotic Century, mainly in Guardian Force, and were usually pretty formidable whenever they were on screen. But of course, Van and the Blade Liger had no trouble with these and would regularly chop the cannon off of these things. Is the most common thing you would see happening, is you just cut the cannon off of it and it would be immobilized. There was also a group of these that appeared escorting Reese and her Psychogenosaur later on when she appeared in the series. And then in New Century Zero, it was this cannon from the Heldigunner that Bit used as a cannon to arm the Liger Zero with when he realized that the Liger Zero did not come standard with any really ranged weapons at all. So he had to outfit it with a modified version of this cannon here. So overall, really cool Zoid with a lot of different implementations. And of course, the motorized the wind-up function does have the cannon move back and forth like this, and he walks on all fours. The mouth can open and close as well, I believe. That's part of the wind-up function, so I'm not going to force it. And yeah, just a really cool guy. I really like, little reptiles and amphibians like this too. So an iguana style Zoid is just really cool. He has that very old school retro Zoids clear dome cockpit, which kind of fell out of favor by the time these guys were implemented in the battle story. But yeah, just a really cool little dude. And I like this guy quite a bit. He does not appear, neither of these Zoids actually appear in the Zoids Battle Legends games, but they do appear in the Zoids Saga games. The Saicurtis is basically a cannon fodder Zoid you'll see quite often in Zoids Saga and Zoids Legacy, whereas the Heldigunner is one you can actually get as a pilotable Zoid in your party and implement it in that game. And I guess it's decent for what it is in that game, but it would be really cool to have this guy be playable in the Battle Legends games, although I don't imagine it will be all that good. It probably behaves very similar to the double-armed lizard. And the Saicurtis would be interesting as a flying Zoid. Apparently the Saicurtis was the template for what would be the double sworder, which is another beetle-style Zoid seen more prominently in the anime than, of course, the Saicurtis, which almost never appeared at all. These guys should be pretty easy and cheap to pick up as well, especially the Hasbro versions, especially if they're already built. I definitely recommend this one a lot more unless you're really partial to the insect-style Zoids like the Saicurtis. If you want to pick this guy up, you could probably pick him up for $10 or less online, and I would definitely recommend that. But definitely paying, 15 or 20 or even more for the Heldigunner, I think is a pretty good deal. I just think he's a more interesting design and has a lot more to offer in terms of lore and goes really well with some of the other Gylos Zoids like the Rev Raptor. So yeah, I really like these guys quite a bit, but mostly this one a little bit. And I think the lore kind of helps. It makes it a little bit more interesting, honestly. But I think this guy does go quite nicely with the Zoids Wild Era Beetle type Zoids, but the Zoids Wild Era ones do look a bit better and show kind of the natural evolution of the design philosophy over the years. So that's probably going to do it for this one, but thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.